Nation of Fitin10, welcome to day 29 and scans wrapped up this morning. We had a lot of good scans today, and I want to remind you that regardless of how you're doing in the challenge, whether you're doing not so great, you're doing okay, or you smashed your mini goal, you still want to look for areas that you can improve upon. And for a lot of you, there is a lot that you can improve upon. Okay, and that's not meant to be by any means. That's not meant to be insulting to you. It's just a reality. And of course, if we can improve in areas, then we're going to see more results. Okay, and this is key. I believe. Well, I know personally, at least, this is key for improving your confidence and self-belief in terms of what you're capable of. So if you, for example, know that you're putting off certain things and you know that you can improve upon them, but you don't make any steps towards that, and you keep reminding yourself, and you do this over time, but you don't make any steps towards improvement, or you don't make any steps towards trying to improve on these things, then you will eventually start to see that you are not capable of it. But the reality is you still are just as capable, but it's just going to reinforce that you're not, even though the reality is it doesn't really actually make any difference. All right, so I really, really want you to try to pick out, be as honest as you can with yourself. If you want, be as honest with me, and let's look for these areas where we can improve upon. I'm not asking you to, improve by 50% or whatever, but let's look for areas. Whatever it is, let's pick the low-hanging fruit. Go with the easy stuff. For some of you, work on getting a protein-strong food every time you eat. Just something simple. Let's work on getting real whole foods in totality in terms of the food choices that you're having. So this will make a big difference. All right. So once we get to these, we could consider more low-hanging fruits, and we can start to climb up the tree a bit more. All right, but look for these areas where we can improve. For some of you, it's cardio. I know a lot of you aren't getting all of your cardios in, and this is going to make a big difference, obviously. All right, so all right, so I talked a little bit about fasting yesterday. I'll talk about it again right now, and just a quick review here. So fasting is basically a prolonged period. We'll just call it a prolonged period where we are not having any caloric consumption. Prolonged period being, I would say, at least 12 hours. Although I'm not really sure if that would be really considered fasting. Usually it's more along the lines of 15 hours or more. Typically people are following things like 16-8, so 16 hours fasting, 8 hours of an 8-hour window at least where you will consume calories. Okay, you'll eat. Some people do 6 hours, some people do 4 hours, some people do 2 hours, some people do periodic extended fasts, 24, 48, 72. I know of people doing 96 hours fasting. Yesterday the question arose because someone asked, does fasting work? And of course I asked the question back, what do you mean by does it work? Be more specific, work for what? And so I went on the assumption that this person was referring to weight loss or fat. Let's be more specific here, fat loss, because ultimately that's what we all really want. And in my opinion, I don't think it's a good long-term solution. Now, there are people I know that have followed fasting, have been successful in their weight loss because their overall caloric consumption has been less, because their window of eating has shortened, so they consume less calories. The other thing that arises when you start to institute boundaries like this is sometimes you will, that alone will motivate you to start thinking about your nutrition, or at least you're more conscious of your nutrition now that you're following a schedule, and so you start to make better choices. So not only are your calories lower, but you're making better choices as well, just because you're following you have a conscientiousness in terms of your eating pattern, right? So So there's going to be some benefits there. And if it is something that you can continue to do, then by all means do it. If it's worked for you and you can continue to do it, then do it. But as I've mentioned before, you are just a reflection of your recent past. So whatever works for you, you got to keep doing that. Okay. I did talk a little bit about, though I didn't go into too much detail, about metabolic inefficiency. We want to be, ideally, really, we want to be metabolically inefficient. I mean, don't you want to eat more calories and keep weight off, not less? I think we all do. And so food intake, and I'll say it again without going into, I guess, too much detail, a happy medium of food intake, so we can call that perhaps a small deficit, daily deficit, is going to allow us to keep, at least long-term, as much metabolic inefficiency as possible. If we create these big deficits, okay, if we go on very low-calorie diets for a long period of time, we're going to hurt that metabolic inefficiency, right? We want to teach our bodies to be more metabolically inefficient, right? We want to burn as much energy as possible. Now, part of this is, if we don't get enough calories, part of that is a loss in lean body mass over time. This will lower our basal metabolic rate, and we want to be careful with that. So I always go with, let's get the most, when it comes to food intake, let's get the most out of the most, which is one of the reasons why I don't give you guys super low calories, okay? It's just not a long-term strategy. Now, with that being said, and a lot of you are fearful of those calories, we want to make sure that what we're intaking is actually a reflection of the calories that I've given you, or more specifically the macros. And this is where, as I mentioned, I think yesterday or the day before, the consistency of that matters as well, right? So it's not about having 5 or 7 days that are great and then maybe having a day which is really not good and sets us back. So having a treat here or there, so I'm going to ask you don't do this in the challenge, especially if you're not accounting for it. If you do have a treat, you got to put it in, you got to at least do some sort of estimation on it. If you don't know exactly what it is in terms of the amount of energy in there and whatever you've eaten, you've got to put that in your food journal, and you've got to count for it, right? So I'm going to recommend that you don't do it for at least 70 days here. Make sure you get all your food in, and remember, here's the thing: if you're creating a small deficit over time, your hunger will build up. Okay, your hunger will build up. It will, trust me. It's like a little bit of digging. The digging you don't notice in the beginning, but over time it adds up. So take advantage of those calories. I know right now, perhaps a lot of you, especially if you've been, in a surplus of calories, you might feel, well, I can just eat way less calories and I don't have any problem doing it. But I'm going to really encourage you to keep all those calories in there. Now, I am going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here because we're supposed to stay on the topic of fasting. So let's just talk a little bit more about it. So what are some advantages of fasting? Well, there is some advantage in terms of gastric emptying. So basically letting everything that's in your intestinal tract get eaten up and utilized. And I think this is really important for digestive health, okay, for having a healthy gut lining, even for promoting healthy gut bacteria. By fasting, you're going to prolong low levels of insulin in the bloodstream. Okay, so you're not going to get your pancreas to produce a lot of insulin, and you're going to keep low blood sugar levels. All right, this is another good thing. All right, so if you don't eat for extended periods of time, you're definitely going to get those benefits. And I'm already at 9 minutes here, so let's just consider this a good thing. All right. It helps to promote autophagy, apparently. And I say apparently because I haven't really looked into it. I've just read that many, many times. People say when we go through periods of not eating, basically the body eats up a lot of what we would consider dead cells, or we can think of dead cells as toxic-like material in the body. And this is good for a whole host of things, including reducing our chances of developing neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, dementia, etc., Parkinson's. And there's some other stuff too that's related to that as well that's going to be good for us. So there's that to consider. All right. So I'd still like to see the long-term data on it, but maybe that's true. Maybe there is going to be a difference. There are people in this area who research this and claim that. So, and certainly I don't know enough about it to really have an opinion. I just like to see more, because all this stuff is kind of new that's coming up. I'd like to see more, just more research put into it and see what people say. When it comes to fat loss, it's not what I recommend. However, it might work for you, so long as, right, we just go back to the basics here, so long as your caloric intake is lower than what it would normally be. But of course, I still think you're at an advantage to pay attention to the types of foods you eat and the types of macros you're getting, and knowing how much of what that is. Because when you know where you are and you know where you stand, it makes it easier to know where to go if you so plateau, which will happen, all right? Or if you want to make more change, all right? So just keep that in mind. Message of the day: this is the week that you will not quit, right? This is the week where you will not quit. So the message today, because this is typically the week that I see people quit, is it's okay to want to quit. It's totally fine. Just don't, okay? So you might have those feelings of, yeah, I want to quit, but no, you're not going to, all right? You got to keep going, because as I think yesterday's message was, you cannot lose in trying, right? You keep going, you're going to continue to make progress. So let's keep going that way. And in many ways, it will get easier. And in many ways, you will learn more about yourself. I don't just mean in terms of your personality and how you react to things, but I mean physiologically how your body is responding. All right, so let's keep going, let's keep trying, let's keep improving, and let's keep pushing forward, right? Positive energy, positive vibes, believe in yourself, for the love of God, give some gratitude, and I will talk to you all tomorrow.